we're about to begin. We would like to right now demonstrate you really quickly our embroidered shorts. Today is the day of embroidery shorts in Ukraine, and we will discuss the bilateral relations of Ukraine and Canada based on our CUTIS agreement. So we are going to be discussing today the IT services. Later on, we will present the toolbook, the handbook on the export of the services to Canada that has been prepared by CUTIS. We will discuss it more tomorrow on the practices of this handbook. My name is Emma Touros. I am the head of the Canada-Ukraine Chamber, Commercial Chamber, and together with the Conference Board of Canada, our chamber is the co-executor of the CUTIS project. After the project will be finalized, a couple of next months, the Ukraine-Canada Chamber of Commerce that has been working for more than 20 years already will continue the development of those directions that our project has started. In what way it's going to be happening, I am sure that my colleagues will tell you later on and more, but after the project will be finalized, I will still be managing the main work of the Chamber of Commerce all around Ukraine, so you can feel free of addressing us during the work of the project and after that also. So what we do really hope for your support, and we would like to invite you to the further collaboration in the framework of the project and after that. And that is why I'm really grateful for the IT Retailers Associations, for the Kharkiv, Kiev, Odessa, Ivano-Frankivsk, Dnipro, Chernihiv, Cherkasy associations of IT, and the associations of the enterprises in the informational technology sphere of Ukraine. Today, my main task is going to be basically following our agenda timely. So before we introduce our main speakers of the day, I would like to inform you about the agenda that we have today. A minute before the presentation is about to change, I'm going to notify the speakers. I would like to ask you to send all of your questions into the chat. You can see the chat button below on the panel, on the lower panel of your Zoom window, and also please address the questions to specific people. By the end of our work, we will have around 20 minutes for questions and answers, and I will choose among the questions that you have posted in. If we will not be able to cover some of your questions in the framework of our webinar, we will send you the answers on the follow-up letter, or we will use our main media channels to cover those also. But one last thing, I would like to ask you to choose that specific corresponding language channel. You can see in the chat bar, Kostya, our colleague who is the mostly fluent with Zoom, he has already posted the information. So you have to choose the language. Can we just, Kostya, can we have this overall screen for us to see all of the people presented today? So yes, we can ask all of the people to turn on our cameras. All of our panelists, please turn your cameras on. Please introduce yourself. We're getting ready to take a look at everyone. So I can see Alexandra Brovko, who is the senior expert on the trade policies of CUTIS project. I also see John DeBoer, who is the principal of the Savdak company. We also say,
thank you so much.
Maxim Boroda, thank you. Can we see you, Maxim? Can't you see me? Yes, we can see you already. We also have Olga Stepa with us. And Maxim is the senior expert on trading policies. Olga Stepa is a coordinator of project in Ukraine. Ola, she will also join us slightly later. There's also Igor Volzhanin, the CEO of the DATA's team. I think that Igor will also join us slightly later. Konstantin Basyuk, the acting director of the Association IT Ukraine. Konstantin, do we have you here? Are you with us? Because you have the introductory word. Konstantin, are you here? Do we have Konstantin Basyuk with us? Can you please check out whether he's with us? Maybe you should unmute your phone for the introductory speech at this presentation. Okay, so we're checking up now, so maybe we will...
Hello.
Konstantin, hello. Hello, Konstantin. Konstantin Vasu, are you with us? So can you hear us properly?
Так, я тут вже. Добрий
Yes,
день.
I'm here. I'm here already. Good day. Good day, Konstantin. And then I would like to pass the floor to
Мої
you.
вітання теж. Добрий день. Дякую вам за можливість привітати учасників цієї події. І насправді ми, я от зараз, ви бачите, теж такі, ми зараз звикли, що онлайн він дозволяє нам спілкуватись з людьми з будь-якого місця, і там, де є засоби зв'язку і електронні засоби, які дозволяють нам це робити.
Anywhere, wherever you are, because of all of the digital devices that we have. So having this opportunity, I'm really grateful that I can greet everyone here. And I would like to have a couple of words about how the association works, because the association's IT associations is currently the one platform that unites the export association, the export entrepreneurs of Ukraine, and what is going on with the association right now with all of the situation in the world. How do we help the businesses, and I guess that we'll even ready to give some of the examples of how do we work, of how do we help the companies to find the clients, to find the contractors for additional services and additional works. So just to give you the brief outline that from our side, all of the challenges are quite understood. Our participants, the participants are members of our associations, those are the companies that operate on the global market. They have their offices in many different countries all over the world. We have the companies who have more than 20 years of experience already. And as an association, we are always supporting their activities. So we are mostly working on developing the international communications, the development of the companies, development of the entrepreneurs, not only building up their international department and services, but also helping them to find the new opportunities for the further growth of their businesses in the new countries. If we speak on Canada, then Canada is a very interesting and very powerful economy, a very interesting direction for the further development, for the digital businesses and digital services as well. We have the experience of collaborating with Canadian clients. Well, of course, there's a really high percentage of our Canadian clients. There are projects that have been working for many years already. But I would like to make everyone sure that if we're speaking on the precise figures and numbers, that we have been dealing with a couple of projects, so we have been actually building our business presence in some other countries, but because now we have the unlimited opportunities for everyone in Canada also, then we're ready to join a more closer collaboration with Canada and to provide the expertise that we have, provide our help that we have, and maybe create additional opportunities for businesses, for the Canadian side and for the Ukrainian companies, the companies who have the development centers or the IT services or products in Ukraine. So we're ready for the further collaboration. I'm once again welcoming you and greeting all of you. We will be following how the events will take shape, and we will try to influence those events positively if we can. So we're open for the further collaboration. Thank you very much. You can give also a couple of words, final words if you would like to. Yeah, well, basically, like my main message was that I wanted to share the specific emotion with you. That today we have a lot of conversations about the crisis. That crisis is an opportunity. That's true, but I would like to add up to that it's important for us to see the opportunity that the crisis offers and to see that and to use it wisely. So when we're getting united with this kind of initiatives, with this kind of programs, we are
більше того, що ми зможемо побачити нові можливості і їми скористатися. Оце дуже важливо. Не просто говорити про якісь абстрактні можливості, а бачити їх, обговорювати і об'єднувати зусилля для того, щоб реалізувати це. Тому що бізнес буде трансформований, він буде багато мати викликів зараз. Економіка дуже багато викликів. І тільки спільні дії і концентрація зусиль на тому, що на самому головному, вона дозволить нам подолати ці складні досить часи. От така історія.
Overcome those difficult and challenging times. Thank you very much, Konstantin. That was really wise and kind words. So we're stepping into the main part of our webinar today, and I would like to pass the floor to Maxim Boroda, the senior trade expert. He is the analyst in the CUTIS project. He will tell us a little bit of insights about Canadian market, and then we will step into the details further. Maxim, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Emma. Good day, dear colleagues. I would like to tell you quite briefly about the Canadian market, about the main maybe trends or specifications that we have seen in the Canadian market. And I would like to start with saying a couple of words about the country itself, because Canada is the second biggest country in the world in area. It's going after the Russian Federation. It's slightly bigger than the US and China. And still, the population of the country, based on the freshest data, is only 38 million of people. It's more or less comparable to Ukrainian population, by the way. And also, it's not also the very big territory and, let us say, a fewer number of population. It's also very unequally dispersed all over the territory, and it also specifies the way the Canada and Canadian economies developed. And also it characterizes how the business is made in this country. So the 90% of Canadian population is located on the territory of around 160 kilometers in radius along the border with the US. This territory has the best climate. And I'm sorry, Maxim, if you would like to show us some slides, then you have to turn your screen on, share your screen with us. Okay, thank you, Costa. We'll try to turn it on now. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now we can see that. Now we can see it. Yes, but also please press play. Okay, maybe now you can see it better. Maybe now you can see better of what I was talking about. So, getting closer to the peculiarities of Canada as a country, 60% of all of the population is located in the most populated provinces through the eastern Canada. That's the Ontario province and Quebec. And by the way, Canadian society is very urbanized society, so there is not a huge amount of people, but there's quite a few very big and strong cities. 1 in 3 Canadian will live in one of 3 big Canadian cities, biggest Canadian cities. It's either will be Toronto, the biggest city in Ontario province, either Montreal, that's the biggest city in Quebec, or Vancouver, the biggest city in the province of the British Columbia in the western part of Canada. Also would like to remind you the 2 big demographic tendencies that also characterize the peculiarity of the economical development of Canada, and also maybe in some way the peculiarities of the business culture in Canada. First of all, it's the trend in aging of the population. This is the trend that is specific for a lot of developed countries, and the developing countries also have this trend in their demographics. But in Canada, it has been observed for quite a longer period of time now, based on the census that has happened in 2016. There's a lot of people, 1 of 7 Canadians is older than 65 years. We understand that this is the trend is going to grow further on. Another trend that you should also consider maybe, and you should also be aware of, this is the immigration, the constant migration. 1 in 5 Canadians has been born not in Canada. He's been born outside of Canada. It means that this person is an immigrant in the first generation. You can see that on the graph. That's how the migrants have been divided based on the regions where they're coming from. As you can see, almost half of the new migrants are coming from Asia, but it's also, you can see that there's a huge amount of people coming from the Eastern Europe. Around 1/3 of all of the migrants in first generation coming from this region. Step into the next moment, step into the next peculiarities of the specifications of the informational communication technology. I would like to emphasize that one of the main peculiarities of that is the cluster structure. So it's not only geographically concentrated, there's geographically concentrated organizations and enterprises that are connected by the business relations, by the business connections. There are a couple of IT clusters in Canada, the so-called pipelines or the corridors from Ottawa and Montreal that are mostly basically located in the Quebec province, and Toronto Waterloo. This is one of the biggest IT clusters in Canada and the second IT cluster in Northern America. Of course, it's only after the Silicon Valley that is located in California in the US. There are a couple of other big IT centers, and the concentrations of the IT centers are in Calgary, in Alberta, and Vancouver in the British Columbia. Moreover, if you are dealing with businesses in Canada, or if you're planning to join the Canadian market, you should also consider that traveling inside of Canada requires a lot of time and requires a lot of money. So in order to get from the Atlantic shore to the Pacific shore, well, if you will use the direct connection flight, you will need 6.5 hours, around 6.5 hours. And it will cost you much more than the comparable flights in Europe, Asia, or US. So there is also the peculiarity of Canada as a country that in order to cover all of the country, if we speak about the time and money needed, there's comparable with how you will make businesses in different continents, because it will take just the same amount of time and just the same amount of money, for example, to fly from London to Toronto or from London to Montreal if you will travel inside of Canada also. Let us take at the structure of the ICT sector. First of all, the overall volume, the overall scale of it, we have seen that it has brought up around 87 billions of Canadian dollars to the GDP of Canada. This is data of 2018. Almost a half of that was for the segment of software and the computer services. There was quite a dynamic growth of this sector in Canada. Overall, the Canadian economy in 2012 has shown the growth of around 2%. Then the sector of the informational and communication technologies has shown the growth of almost 4%. So 3.7, that will be basically twice as the growth of the Canadian GDP overall. If we'll take a closer look to the separate segments, like for example, the wholesale trade of the products of the ICT, and the biggest segment, the software and the computer technologies, then you can see that the growth is even more significant. We're speaking about by 12% and 8%. So for Canada, for such a very, let us say, sustainable economy as Canadian economy is, those are the very significant terms of growth. If we're speaking about the overall number of the enterprises that we can count in this sphere, there's around like 42,000 of the enterprises, but it's important to say that the SMEs are prevailing. The majority of those businesses are SME. On the Canadian standards, the enterprises with the amount of the employees up to 500 people are SMEs. That means that makes around a 99.8% what the ICT sphere is made. Only 0.2% of IT companies in Canada, they have more than 500 employees, and thus that they can be considered to be the big businesses. Moreover, 85% of the companies in Canada, they only are made of 10 people. So those are basically the micro enterprises and micro businesses. If we're not speaking about the overall cash flow and then the income flow, if we're only judging on the number of the employees. Speaking on the overall employment in this sphere, we have to outline that the sector as overall a sphere of an industry is a very good employer, a very powerful employer. 2019-18, 1.2 million of Canadians have been working there in the IT sector. You remember there's overall population of 38 million of people. If we will only consider the economically active population, only the people who are in the working age who are active on the labor market, can say that it means that around 10% of all of the working labor in Canada is employed in the IT sector. That's a very huge share. This amount of employees have been divided between the IT, the solely IT enterprises, that's around 41%, and other spheres where there's also the opportunities and the functional that can be considered in the field of informational and communicational technologies. The overall growth of the employment rate has also been very powerful, has also been goodly seen compared to the economy overall, that 3.8%, the employment growth, while the overall economy growth is 1.3%. So it's almost by 3 times more than overall economy. The fastest growth has been seen in the, once again, software sphere and the computer services sphere. That will see the growth by 8% in employment a year. I also would like to draw your attention to another piece of information. Around the 40% of people who are now working in ICT are immigrants. That is a very important thing for us because it shows us the high demand, the demand that is constantly growing for additional working labor in these spheres. Around the 1/4 of all of the working labor is women. The level of payment, the level of salaries, that is something that also gives you the understanding of the competitiveness of this sphere overall. But on the other hand, it also shows you of some additional opportunities to understand whether the offers of Ukrainian enterprises and Ukrainian service givers can be competitive. The level of salaries in this sphere is around 1.5 higher than the overall salary rates in overall economy. You can see that 52,000 Canadian dollars is the average level of the salaries for all of the spheres in economy, while the IT sector has shown around 78,000 Canadian dollars a year as the middle level of the salaries for the employees in the ICT. There has been also very significant growth by 18%, starting from 2012 to 2018. So in these 5 years, there has been very significant growth in salaries, while overall in the economy, this was only 12%. So it's quite clear for us that it's a very interesting sector. It's a very demanding sector. If we speak about education, the 62% of employees of this sector, they have had higher education, while in economy in Canada overall, around 30% have the higher education. You can see at this slide, I do believe that it will be interesting for you as the professionals in all of the spheres. It will also be seen in our book, in our handbook that you will receive at the end of the presentation. I'm not going to now tell you about all of these salaries. I would like to emphasize that the differences between the lowest salary and the highest salary at the corresponding positions is very significant, from 2 up to 2.5 or 3 times sometimes. So you have to understand that this is Canada, and overall there is a big significant difference in economy. That's very rare. cases for Canadian market like this. So this is the peculiarity of this very sector. And the final thing I would like to draw your attention to, and I believe that might be very interesting for you, just to evaluate on whether your offers can be competitive at the Canadian markets, just to compare the hourly rates of the employees of the IT sphere in Ukraine and Canada. So you can see those the percentages that you can see in this graph. They're showing you the amount of all of the workers, all of the employees who are working based on this hourly rates. You can see that in Ukraine, and I do believe that you are all aware that the absolute majority of, Maxim, you have just a minute. Yes, I'm finalizing, I'm closing up, I'm wrapping up. So you can see that the over salary from 25 up to $50 an hour, and just a fewer number of people, around like 5% of people receive more than $100 an hour. So in Canada, almost a half of all of the IT specialists, IT professionals that work for 100 to 149 Canadian dollars an hour. So I do believe that the data gives you the very good outline on whether we are competitive, what are the opportunities for our competition in prices for the IT services. Thank you very much for your attention. I will gladly cover all of the questions if you'll have some. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maxim. You have stuck to your timing very strictly, and I would like to once again remind you about the questions that you can share with the people. And right now, I would like to pass the floor to a person who knows the best all of the peculiarities of the trade in issues that are currently. So she is an expert on the trade policies. She is the best experts on that. So please welcome Alexandra Brovko. Good day, dear colleagues. There were some slight troubles with the connection, but as far as I understood, that Emma has already introduced me. And I would like to continue in the presentation, of our handbook that we have created. And I would like to continue slightly what Maxim has said. I would like to tell you a little bit more of what is our handbook made of. And I would like to tell you that there is an in-depth information with all of the links. It is also available in our handbook that you will receive after this webinar. I believe that all of our participants, they have no doubts that Canada is is a country of the high technologies with a high level of development of the information communication sector of economy. And Maxim has already outlined that in this sector, there's more than 1.3 million people working in this sector, but it seems to be not enough. It seems that the demand on the highly qualified employees can now be found in Canada not only among the graduates and alumni in science or informational technology spheres or mathematics spheres, but there's a big need of the technical personnel. But the way that demand grows is much faster than the Canadian universities can provide additional new labor. In the recent 15 years, the Canadian economy has generated more than 1,300 new jobs that are connected to the development of the information and communication services. And Maxim has said about the big share of the migrants that are working in this sector, and their share is growing sustainably. So we can see that there is a lot of people, the usage of the migrant labor has grown up to 30%. There's also the three different scenarios of the father-owned development and the father-owned demand in this sphere. The first scenario, the so-called pessimistic scenario, when there's going to be the decrease of demand. And even though the pessimistic title of this scenario, then the number of the employees that are still needed, the numbers of the workers that will be still needed are going to be around 250,000. If we are speaking on optimistic scenarios, when the demand will keep on growing in this sphere, it means that there will be the need of around 360,000 additional new employees. And the middle option under this scenario, Canada in the recent years will need around 300,000 new additional professionals in IT services. It should be also said that the growing demand can be connected to the in-depth level of introducing the new technology of all of the spheres of production. So those are the new technologies like working with artificial intelligence, VR, AR, working with blockchain, the development of additional mobile apps using the new technologies and introducing 5G. So based according to the Council on Informational and Communication Technologies of Canada, uh, which are still very relevant for us. There are top 5 professions that are now in the highest demand in Canada. And you can see those on the slide. Those are the list of those professions. So the manager of the computer informational system, the computer engineers, the analysts for data analysts and administrators of databases, the developers, and the technical specialists in graphics. So for the Canadian companies and the companies that provide those services, the biggest challenge is gaining the timely access to highly qualified professionals that they need. But another biggest challenge is to actually getting into those balance of price and quality of the services retrieved. I would like to give you a couple of more numbers, a couple of more figures that characterize the overall demand on the IT specialists, IT professionals in this industry. In a couple of recent years, Canada has been developing the sphere that is also connected to artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of companies who have been starting to work with it. There have been working additional R&D activities that are connected to the artificial intelligence. So starting with a lot of different industrial robotechnics, the robotized medical assistants, the intellectual games, software for the financial forecasting, so on and so forth, many different apps in healthcare, many additional apps for the pilotless delivery. Because of the development of this new sector of economy, there is the forecast that up to 2023, there's going to be a growing demand in this sphere. And the growing demand will make of like 63,000 professionals. Once again, considering those 3 scenarios of the further on development of the IT sector, of whether the demand will rise or fall. The other IT sector that is also in a very active development currently, where we also see the high demand for the highly qualified professionals, there's the cybersecurity. It is considered that up till 2023, the demand for those people in this job will be increasing by 45,000. Speaking of all the specialists of the cybersecurity, and the Canadian market of cybersecurity in 2017 was evaluated in around $2 billion. And among the professions that are in high demand, those are basically the specialists from cybersecurity. Those are the certified architects of the security system, the professionals on security systems, so on and so forth. The most prospective direction, as the IT specialists outlined, is the data analysts, the analytical centers, who are working in the informational sphere. So especially working with the companies who are working with AR and VR. When we are speaking on the experts of the services and experts of goods, then we do not quite understand what is the difference between that, but will be a mistake that providing the services, exporting the services for the consumer that is located abroad, then is much easier than paying all of the payments on the border and exporting your goods. There is a difference, and sometimes exporting your services is much harder than exporting your goods. And we are now facing the need for the mutual verification, the mutual acknowledgement of the diplomas of the professionals. Sometimes it is impossible and very complicated, and that's really makes us, really prevents us from accessing the market freely. Overall, in the international trade, there are 4 ways of trading services, and every country, depending on the level of the WTO or on the other agreements, every country, they have their specific obligations on those 4 types of trade and services, and they're all set out their own limitations based on those 4 types. The first types is the so-called trans-border delivery of services. This is the one that is most widely spread. It is also very liberalized. It's not a lot of limitations set in this case. In this case, both the client and the supplier will be located in their own countries, and only the service, like something that is non-material, it currently trespasses the conditional border. Like, for example, if we have some IT companies in Ukraine that are developing their software for the clients in Canada, and the specialists of both of the companies that are located in their countries, it's only that the service that developed software is passing through the conditional law. The second type of service provision is basically the consumptions of the services. It was really hard for me to find some examples for the IT services, because the good example of this service is tourism. Like, we, kind of, maybe we were not sure that we are the subjects of the services trade when we're going abroad. But this is the way how it works. The consumer of services goes to the other country and consumes the services there. Like, just imagine that the Canadian tourists are coming to Ukraine. They are downloading some of the applications for Ukrainian restaurants and eating Ukrainian or ordering Ukrainian food. This is the delivering of services in the type 2, and a lot of liberalized countries that also do not have a lot of limitations there. Type 3 of the service delivery, what is about it? The type 3, that's it presupposes that you register the company, affiliated company, there's a company or the representative of your company in another country. For example, this is also connected with additional investment into the country, and there are some limitations. For example, the countries, they would limit the minimum number of your founding capital that is needed when you register the company in the specific sphere. Or maybe there are additional demands that, for example, the director or the main accountant is going to be the citizen of the country where the company is found. So, and you can see the example, like, for example, there is a Canadian company that builds an affiliated company in Ukraine, or vice versa, then it's going to be a different type of service provision. Service provision type number 4, the most complicated, if we're speaking about the limitations that can be used in this type of services, because it means that there is the physical presence of the person in the country that consumes the services. It means that, for example, the IT specialist from Ukraine goes to Canada and provides the services on developing the very same software there on Canadian location. Considering how that this type of services provision considers the access to the market, migrations issues, engaging labor services, then it is the most complicated one. Those are the requirements on service trading. This is, by the way, the one that says the requirements from Canada. These are 2 main conditions. One of them, it says that the types of provision of the services, 1, 2, 3, that is called the computer and related services. In these agreements, it said there's no limitation to that, so there's no additional there's no additional limitations for that. But, for example, type of service provision number 4 is not liberalized at all. It is closed. Why? Because there are some horizontal, so-called horizontal limitations for the Canadian markets. The horizontal liabilities, the Canadian government has said that all of the service providers that are being divided in a couple of groups. The most important group that is going to be interesting for us is group number 3. Those are specific professionals that have the specific qualification requirements. So the service provider, those are, like, for example, the business visitors. They are visiting Canada for some business meetings. They cannot provide you additional business services, and they will not be awarded with the specific salary or fees. In Canada, there is a specific department that regulates the visas issues. We know that, for example, if you would like to travel to Canada, you will require a visa. We have the visa regime with Canada. And so the business visitors can be in Canada for more than 90 days, not for more than from 90 days. There's also there is a different type of visa. For example, if the Ukrainian company opens an affiliated company in Canada, then, for example, the workers of the highest managing level, those are the professionals and executive managers, they can also visit Canada, and there, when they have this working need, based on the legal rules, cannot be more than 3 years in Canada. That is what is mentioned in the overall General Agreement on Trade in Services in the WTO framework. Why are we interested about that? Well, we're interested about those additional groups, the specialists, according to GATS, and especially for the senior informational service officers, there are some additional requirements. So it's not that every person can believe that they're the first computer specialists in Canada. So who is the specialist of ICTs of level 1? So this is the person who has additional diploma of the Master of Computer Science or its analog. Alexander, you only have a couple of minutes left. Okay, so you know it's not only so for the first computer specialist, now we just have 1 or 2 minutes for you. 1 or 2 minutes for you. Okay, I'm wrapping up then. So what is the senior informational specialist? It also means that you can be in Canada for 90 days in a year, but there's also additional limitation that you can only do the 10 entries to Canada, only 10 times. You can come to Canada in the framework of this 90 days, which is very interesting. Also, I made this link from this slide because, like, if you will be interested and if it would be relevant for you, just to take a look at the additional limitations and additional requirements. For example, there is the huge list of requirements of the company that invites this professional to work. It cannot be like the so-called shell companies when the company has been created specifically to have the operational address and that it does not provide a specific activities or services. Also, there might not be a company, for example, that works with employment abroad. It is very much tracked. And sometimes it is sad that in some of the cases that people are trying to fake licenses just to get some more labor forces to provide the services. And to wrap it up, I just would like to say that currently we have the agreement on free trade, but we do not have yet the provisions on the trade of services there. Why? Because I would like to give you the example between our agreements on free trade with Europe and Canada. For example, if we're speaking about the European-Canadian agreement, then the computer specialists say that they can stay in Canada for a year without additional licenses for work. This is a very important benefit because Europe and Canada, they have visa-free regime. So I'm very optimistic still when we're going to, once again, revise the CUFTA, that is currently going on. If we will listen to what the Prime Minister of Canada and the President of Ukraine has said in the past, so maybe we will see there's going to be some preferential conditions of access in Canadian markets, especially in the IT services. Because currently what we see, there might be lots of problems, for example, with acknowledging Ukrainian diplomas in Canada. And I do believe that people who have already been facing this problem, they know that the process of verification and acknowledgements of our diplomas is very hard and long. Like, the practice shows that most of the documents provided by Ukrainian universities are not going to be acknowledged by Canadian institutions. But we're still hopeful, we're still optimistic. Well, yet optimistic, we will take a look at the overall final text of our CUFTA agreement, updated CUFTA agreement, when the process will be broader. Just to wrap up and summarize everything that I've said, I would like to say that right now, the most forecasted types are the type of service provision number 1, number 2, number 3. There's no limitations there according to the WTO provisions. And once again, reminding you that crisis is the time for additional opportunities, I would like to say that even facing some of the limitations from Canada, there's no limitation from Canada now. You have to just use it now, and we will continue in working with those opportunities with you also. That's all from my side. I do hope I haven't ran out of my time very badly, but that was once again thank you very much, Sasha. So it was really pleasure for us to listen to this important information. So it's quite okay that we slightly overtook the schedule. And now I see there's always some technical problems, even in the high technological issues. So that is why I would like to switch from theory to practice, and I would like to pass the floor to Olga Stepa. She's not only working with the ICT direction in our project, but also Olga has been working for 10 years in the ICT in Canada, and I hope that after what we've heard about as a general intro, we will also hear what is really going on in the sphere. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for the introduction. I'm pleased to welcome all of our audience. I am the coordinator of CUTIS projects in Ukraine, and before I've joined the CUTIS project for 10 years, I've been living in Canada. And even though I have been trained in economy and marketing, for 7 years. For the last 7 years, I've been working in the ICT companies in Toronto. Just a couple of words I just would like to say about the ICT sector in Ukraine. I would just, to add up some points about the general picture that my colleagues have already set up. If we speak about Ukraine, it's like historically happened that Ukrainian IT companies have been looking for their clients abroad from the very beginning of the sphere, because the inside domestic demand for the IT services wasn't supported with the financial flow. And this is the very good, strong point of Ukrainian ICT sector, because we have the benefit of exporting affords, we have the experience of looking for our clients abroad, we have the experience of working with the international partners. In the recent times, the Ukrainian IT sector has shown the very significant growth. Just a couple of facts and figures for you that will support this opinion. Well, first of all, Ukraine is #1 country on the market of outsourced services in Eastern Europe, #1 in Central and Eastern Europe on the number of the experienced and educated engineers with the specific international certifications, and #4 in the world on that. Ukraine also is #1 in Central and Eastern Europe based on the outsource of the services level. Ukrainian ICT has shown the growth of more than 40 times in the recent 20 years, and it demonstrates the very high level of growth of 25%. And just to add up those figures, more than 100 global international centers have their R&D centers in Ukraine. That is a very impressive fact for me. And one of the evidence of the Ukrainian ICT sector success is the beginning of the investment of Canada's company that was called Brookfield and Partners for the development of the IT park, innovative park in Lviv. The project presupposes that there's going to be around 100,000 square meters of modern universities, business offices, and premises that are going to engage the local and international ICT companies. But that's not an easy process, even all of the benefits that we currently see. CUTIS project is how the CUTIS works, because basically the project has been created on the Canada's government initiative, and it presupposes that there's going to be the 5-year loan support of some specific directions of exporting Canadian goods and services to Canada. One of the directions that we're working is the ICT services. We have already coming to an end of our work as a project, but throughout all of these times, throughout all the times of the existence of the project and the functioning of the project, we've gained some really important results in the ICT sphere also. Just to mention a couple of facts for your attention, for you to understand that in our collaboration in our collaboration with the TIFL Canada organizations that we had the first ICT experts coming from. We have started from September 2018. We have, first of all, selected Ukrainian ICT companies that were interested in exporting their services to Canada. They've had been selected. They've had a specific interview with our sectoral experts. Then they've been participating in some additional trainings on the basis of collaborations with Canada. In October and March 2019, we had additional training that the company has developed their profile together with our sectoral experts. They have received additional recommendations of planning their exports based on some of the instruments and tools and templates that are applicable for Canada. April 2019, we had the first ICT mission to Canada. The main part of it was the mission with the B2B session that has been organized by our experts. November 2019, we had the second ICT mission to Canada. We'll also provided the additional platform for B2B meetings. From the Canadian side of the project, in January, March 2019, we had this big work on delivering the information, having the informational campaign on the potential collaborations for the companies that will be interested in that, especially in Ontario province. We had a collaboration with the local businesses and the regional stakeholders, mostly in Hamilton, with the Ontario Centres of Excellence in the province of Ontario, with Ryerson University and the governments of Ontario. On the 2nd of April, as I've already said, we started our mission with the B2B projects, mostly in Toronto and Hamilton. And we had the visit from Ukrainian ICT companies to Calgary in May the same year. We also have visited the tech accelerators and business hubs. For example, we visited Mars in Toronto. We had informational sessions on the business issues in ICT. And we also had the B2B sessions as usual. June last year, we had another round of the B2B meetings with the support of our project and with the support of Ukraine-Canada Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, together with the Export Promoting Office of Ukraine. Well, we had the event of Ukraine House that has been visited by Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the freshly elected at that time President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. September 2019, we also had the Canadian breakfast with the participation of the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine, with the support of the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce and in collaboration with the Canadian Embassy in Ukraine and Lviv. In November 2019, we had the second mission with the B2B meetings to Toronto, together with the officers, the export promoting officers of Ukraine. November 2019, once again, they had yet another mission when we have visited the conference, the SARS North, when we have been visiting Ottawa. And there are meetings that have been organized in North Ontario and Ottawa. Those are short but very important and impressive amounts of the activities that had been done by the project to support Ukrainian ICT companies in their really hard way and hard path to reach Canadian markets. We had more than 70, I think around 100, let us say, so-called warm pre-arranged meetings in Canada. We have found the new ways for the business development. We have settled a partnership in Canada, for example, collaborating with Canadian startups and business incubators. We have gained much better results and indexes of awarenesses for Canadian businesses on the additional opportunities and experiences of working with ICT sector in Ukraine. And for example, for this digital cybersecurity and in financial and technical collaborations in fintech, we have understood that Ukrainian companies have even better experiences than Canadian colleagues, and that was something that really impressed our Canadian counterparts. We also had a lot of efforts in setting out the relationships and giving the informational awareness about how competitive the ICT of Ukraine can be in Canada. the practical experience that has been gained by CUTIS project. It really helped us to shape and design the specific set of attributes for the future exporter to Canada. This is the toolbox, the must-have that you cannot even think about exporting any kind of services to Canada without having it. First of all, you should speak English, that's quite clear. Then it's quite clear you should have the website with the good English. You have to have this professional, be able to do the professional presentation in English. You should have the expertise in communication sphere, which is very important. Then there's also, it's impossible, for example, to send a letter to an unknown person in Canada just saying, hi, how are you doing? That wasn't, let us say, not very pleasant surprise for a lot of people. You should be working in the formal business ethics in Canada, and then you actually better quite very patient. So it's very important to answer in 24 hours, and but it's not, fortunately, not our culture, and a lot of people, they neglected this rule, as our experience shows. It is also important to take down the mistakes of your own services, the evaluation and assessment of your services, the calculation of the prices for your services, and you have to give a very detailed pricing for your product. You have to understand that in Canada, you're starting everything from the very beginning and you're competitive with the whole world there. You have to say farewell to the stereotypes. Like from my personal experience, my first working day in Canada in the big international company in Toronto, and my computer should be connected to the network. And thus I am waiting for the system administrator to come. So, you know, I am the victim of my own stereotypes. That is why I'm waiting to see a young person. But there is a senior lady, in a wheelchair coming up to me, and the first thing was for me that this person got lost in a big business center and she needs a bit of help of how she should get out because all of those doors are on the are closed. And she said, like, hi, I'm Maria, the system administrator, welcome to our company. And I was slightly surprised by that. So what I wanted to say, that you should get rid of your own assumptions or stereotypes or prejudice when you are going to enter the new market. Being flexible is the key to any kind of success, especially in the Canadian market. If you do not have the specific answer during the negotiations, and you do not know what you answer at this very specific moment, what kind of conditions you can offer to your partner, please do not say no straight away. Please just offer them a slight delay. You can just say, like, can I check it out and tell you and respond to you on that tomorrow? Well, I have to consider that and to have to talk to my team about it. So you're leaving yourself a little bit of space. You're giving yourself a little bit of space for flexibility, and you make the impression of the person who's ready for compromises, but you need additional information and about that. Please also follow and stick to your promises. Stick to your promises. Any kind of activities, especially entering the Canadian market, it requires your patience and consistency in your expert activities. Then again, what do we also speak? There is some cultural differences. There is a difference in the Canadian business communication processes. We have to understand that the cultural differences, they can actually influence on the differences of how do we practice businesses. There are two different cultures in business cultures. There is the English-speaking business culture, and like, for example, that has to be the direct communication without no additional questioning of your personal life or rumors or stars or going to the parties or receptions. In French-speaking Canada, you will have a couple of minutes of informal conversation before the business conversation will take place. So this very important formula that our sectoral experts usually provide to the companies that participate in the project, this is the scheme that demonstrates the Canadian communication process. As you can see, it's linear. It's very straightforward. So everything starts with sincerity and openness and building the trust at the very first stage, ending up with a business offers with the business benefits that you offer from both of the sides and discussing the possible risks. And it ends up with the step-by-step action plan on implementing the agreement that has been reached and active actions to implement it. And once again, the issue of the cultural differences, the business cultural differences, which is a key barrier for us to enter the Canadian market and to enter the Canadian market for many companies, even the ICT companies. That's a very interesting research that our Canadian experts has shared with us and with our colleagues, that based on the recent sociological data on the sociology institution in Kiev, it says that Ukrainians say no nine times more than our Western partners, 9 times more frequently. And we're not even speaking about some kind of negotiations in the business agreement. So once again, Ukrainians are very negative in that. So let us be more flexible, give more opportunities to your business partner. Do not use no straightforward. It means that you will never have a step back. We already have spoken on the topic of English. But I would like to emphasize that one thing that you have to consider is language, and good language. To have a good business relationship between companies, you have to speak English without intermediaries. So there has to be the person who's responsible for decision making, or the company of the people who, or the board of people who is responsible for decision making. They have to speak English. If you have an intermediary as an interpreter, with all the respect to interpreters, then there will be a very complicated process of trust building with your partner. And sometimes it is also the barrier for further on success. Another moment is the moment of expectation. The more we learn about the behavior of the new markets that we would like to work on, the more realistic expectations we might build. Business needs time. The biggest, in my opinion, treasure of Canadians is time, and they really cherish time they have. That's about everything about it. Like, for example, being late for a business meeting. If you have a business meeting somewhere in Turkey or in Africa or in Greece, then you actually know that it's going to be 15 minutes late. If you have a business meeting in Canada, please come in time, because this has a very negative outbreak if you will be late on the Canadian meeting. If the company is really interested in you, before you keep on moving forward, there is time needed to evaluate the new services, the new product, the new prices, to build up the profile, to evaluate the competitors on the market, so on and so forth. Overall, Canadian partners, they're slightly freezing down the process, so it takes quite a lot of time. But then, in sometimes months later, they're speeding up, accelerating the process, and they actually believe that you will move as fast as they are. But our companies usually have already forgotten about the potential business with Canada. This is what usually happens, unfortunately. Building up the business collaboration, that's very important. Remember that the share of Canadian market is smaller, for example, smaller than the United States business share. But if you are reaching to Canadian needs of the market, if you can fulfill the needs of the Canadian market, then you can also think about getting closer to the US market. When you're already basing in Canada, when you already have satisfied clients in the Canadian market, you can also think about accessing the US market. Relationship is very important. Building trust requires time. Canadian partners, they like to build business relationships based on mutual respect and trust, and they will be loyal to you as long as you're loyal to them. As our experts say, it's really hard to get into Canadian market, but if you already got to the Canadian market, then you will have a very long, sustainable collaboration with your Canadian partners. We have the cases when the Canadian companies had not changed their partners in 25, 30 years in a row. That's basically consistency, and this is the consistency that is one of the main characteristics of Canadian markets. So patience Patience is the key for the success in the Canadian market. None of the businesses is made fast. So it's not a single transaction in this market. Your aim should be the long-term business relationship that will fulfill your partner's needs and your needs and your desires. Being persistent, and the long-term, no long-term work. When your assumption is not realistic and when you believe that it will just take a couple of days to build up businesses, the companies, they give up usually, what we see. The companies, they have their previous relationships with business when they have the agreements made at the first meeting at the very same table. But in Canadian practice, there is a step-by-step business processes in place. So first of all, you're building up the relationship and building up some communication, building up the trustworthy relationships between the partners, and only after that you're starting to build up the mutual business processes. Of how to overcome those barriers, it's quite clear once again that's mostly learning, studies and training, participating in the Northern American fairs, conferences, shows in different events, and not to give up, diversify your sources, live as Canada to be in this informational space and see those opportunities that exist there, and to know how to use them properly. And just a couple of overall recommendations based on the experience of projects. So before jumping into a swimming pool, make sure that there is the water there, and make sure that you will have the time to learn Canadian market as a new market. Create the export business plan. Research specifically based on the market. So start your business activities in Canada by learning the market. Visit Canada. Take a closer look, note down the important information, study the mentality of your Canadian possible partners, and only after that you basically start the factually looking for the possible partners in the market. Also, make sure that your portfolio has to be ready for the work. You have to outline those international partners you're working with, and let your happy clients speak on your behalf. So in Canada, you can be really known by the good deeds that you're doing. So it's important for you to have this international collaboration, working with your American partners, for example. This is the closest neighbor of Canada, and it's if you have the happy Canadian clients, if you might also have the happy US clients, but you have to build a relationship with trust. Then it is important to find your niche in the market. Identify your competitive advantages. Identify your potential partners that would fit you the best, not because you always wanted to work with this company before, but considering the size of the company, considering the specification of the company, the time and the team that you can dedicate to the further on development of collaboration with Canada. Keep in mind that you have sent the letter for your partner's email with all of the information on the experience of the company, on the international partner that you have been dealing with, or the project that you have been dealing with. Try to be very brief and try to be very precise and accurate in your communication. Do not start with hi, how you doing, what's up, and so on and so forth. That's a very, very bad way to start letters. So find what really makes you unique on your market. That is the most important thing. Keep in mind that the potential partner receives the hundreds of those electronic letters with the offers of new potential partners from all over the world. The difference that you will make in your presentation will be based on how your offer will be seen on the product or services in the eyes of the reader. Make sure that you will dedicate the time to learn about the potential partner as much as possible. Yes, I know that I'm running out of time. I'm wrapping up. So please learn throughout the person's company, and it also has to be reflected in your communication that you have done your research work properly. And there is a lot of information also that you can check out in the presentation. I do not want to draw a lot of attention to those details, but like, for example, there are some lists of events that would be interesting for you to visit in Canada if you're working in the ICT sector. I would just like to finally say that there are a couple of words, that there is an unique, free of charge free of charge opportunity to get your profile of your company to the export portal, so you can actually inform your partners on the services that you provide before you come visit Canada. And this project, this portal has been created with the support of Ukrainian exporters and with the support of CUTIS project also. It is mostly dedicated to inform Canadian companies that are searching for partners in Ukraine. They've started a very broad informational campaign on getting the Canadian professionals with the offers of the services provided from Ukraine. You can also see that there is the link to this portal. If you're going to be interested in that, please address us. We will help you to fulfill your profile in the best way. Just a couple of words also, which is also important from my point of view. There are the platforms for promoting your services and from setting the contacts with Canada. Please, it was very good if your company is already presented at this kind of like good firms or clutch. If you're already the member of some of the local communities, then meetups, for example, works really properly in Toronto, and you can find some additional opportunities to offer your services to the partners in Canada. And also joining to the local groups in Facebook, in Facebook, in Reddit, in LinkedIn. So the project is coming to an end, but there are a couple of organizations that you can work with. You can ask for additional help and support when you're entering the Canadian markets as informationally if you would like to work with that. First of all, the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce, that's the export and investment portal that will be functioning on the framework of the CUCC. That's the platform that has already have more than 25 years on exporting the services to Canada and accessing Canadian market. There is the state export promotion offices, then the regional chambers of trade and commerce, there's business associations, so on and so forth. But just couple of words, the final couple of words about of what are the forms of further-on collaboration with the Canadian partners. Well, just like those are the first of all based on our agreements. So like let us the final thing that this is there's already the final thing from my side, that a lot of people are coming to us, addressing to us, saying like, give us the contacts of the possible partners, of buyers. How should we get through their contacts? We need more meetings. I really like how our program directors answer this question. Like, you do not need a lot of meetings, you just need one, but with the company that you can make that agreement with. So all of the contacts are all available in the internet, but based on our experiences, then a lot of people never address it. A lot of people are buying some databases with a lot of money, and by the way, there's no return rate, but a lot of financial expenses. There is the collaboration with the organization that have connection with Canada. Oля, we just have to wrap up. You have to wrap up. Okay, just a couple of 3 sentences. I'm sorry, because this is the topic that I can't stop and can't get into this 20 minutes that I've had. There's too much of experience that we have about it. For example, the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce that has already for more than 25 years in the market, they have their experience, they have their contacts, and they have their experience in setting out the bridges. And of course, what really works best is the personal contact, is the participating in any kinds of activities. We have companies that has been for around like 9 times has been going through all of the events of our project in Canada, and I can say that they're the most successful in the project because of that. This is something that you have to keep in mind. This is something that you have to consider it when you are starting your business relations with Canada. Thank you very much for your attention. If you'll have any questions, please, I will gladly answer those. So we'll keep the questions till the end. I'm going to answer to those questions that we have already, and we have to say sorry to John that we are slightly out of schedule. John, are you with us?
I am. Good afternoon. Yes, can you hear me?
Morning, if you have a morning, so welcome. I would like to say that SecDev is a partner of Canada-Ukraine Trade and Investment Support Project, and John will tell a little bit more about practice and about opportunities in Canada. Thank you, John, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to be sharing my screen. My name is John DeBoer from the SecDev organization. We are a digital risk and security firm that specializes in understanding opportunities, also risks related to the digital sphere. And we're a very proud partner of CUTIS. And so our role here is to really help CUTIS navigate the IT sector in Canada, to identify potential opportunities for Ukrainian companies and Canadian companies to get together and promote trade. Today, what I'm going to be speaking about is the impact of COVID-19 on the Canadian IT sector. What is clear is that this crisis has been highly disruptive. It has fundamentally changed the landscape when it comes to not just Canada's IT sector, but the world's IT sector. And most importantly, it has accelerated digital disruption in unforeseen ways. What most people are asking today is, when can we go back to normal? When will all of this stop? The reality is that nothing, particularly in the IT sector, will go back to normal. The new normal is one that is being created through the digital disruption that we're witnessing today. The digital landscape and in fact the entire business landscape has changed dramatically over the course of the past 2.5 months. As you can see on this slide, there have been both winners and losers. The airline industry has lost approximately 60 to 70% of its overall business. In fact, many airlines and airports are saying that they will go bankrupt within a matter of weeks if governments do not step in. Oil and gas, manufacturing, hospitality, all of that has lost shares and profitability dramatically in an unforeseen way. But the winners are those that have managed to push forward in the digital economy. And as you can see here, internet retail, fintech, internet services, all of them have grown in terms of profitability, in terms of share price, moving forward on average. So this is the new reality that the COVID situation has created. And it's not just a reality for today, it's likely a reality moving forward. What's happening is that the COVID experience is accelerating digital transformations that were already in place. However, it's also important to know that not all IT companies are winning. Canada, for instance, has been dramatically affected. 80% of the IT sector and startups and companies have experienced layoffs since March as a result of COVID. Canada's leading alliance representing technology has declared that up to 60% could actually go bankrupt over the next month. In fact, 12,000 small Canadian tech companies have already closed their doors, are no longer as a result of COVID-19. This is a dramatic change that has taken place in just a period of perhaps 6 weeks. We're also seeing an increase in mergers and acquisitions of large US tech companies buying up Canadian tech companies, oftentimes at highly discounted prices. Sorry. The other reality that this is creating, is that layoffs have been massive, even in sectors that we would have assumed would be part of the winning group. For instance, in the area of artificial intelligence, Canadian companies, even leading Canadian companies like Element AI, have been forced to cut their workforce by between 15 to 50%. Food delivery companies, part of the sharing economy, have also been dramatically hit. Ritual, one of the leading Canadian companies, has cut 54% of its workforce. And then of course in e-commerce and fintech, another area that is supposed to have made the digital transformation, to have been on the winning side of this COVID-19 experience, is also facing strain. So the reality in the landscape is a harsh one. It's one that requires critical understanding of dynamics underpinning economic opportunities in Canada where IT can serve. So where is the opportunity that we're speaking about? What can Ukrainian companies, in particular, IT companies in Ukraine, do to capitalize on some of the digital transformations in which you have strength and a value added? What we've seen in the Canadian market is an explosion, and in fact, this has been a global trend in e-gaming. A number of Canadian e-gaming companies are unable to keep up with demand. Enthusiast Gaming has seen a 40% increase in traffic since COVID hit. They're hiring left, right, and center. Bragg Gaming Group has also faced a similar explosion. In fact, their share price has doubled since March. This is a sector where some Ukrainian companies have competency. Telemedicine is now the new norm, with patients unable to visit hospitals, to see their doctors as a result of social distancing. We've seen a dramatic increase in telemedicine, where doctors consult their patients through e-devices. Babylon Health, one of Canada's leading telemedicine companies, is hiring more than 200 people, technicians. Dialogue Technologies, another 250. Mind Beacon has seen a 15% increase in traffic. This is a sector that is exploding, and it's unlikely to be a temporary thing. Another area, as you all know, has been remote learning. Canadian institutions, schools have been closed since March 15th. Universities are in fact not planning to open up, possibly until January. They're offering their courses online. Companies like Applyboard has raised an additional $100 million in just the past month. And now they have reached 2 billion unicorn status. This is going to be a sector that is going to explode and is already exploding. One where software developers and other technicians and technology companies need to support. Canada and Canadian companies can simply not keep up with the demand. Digital supply chains. This has been an area that has been upended. Previous model of just-in-time supply chains that see a globalized marketplace of production and supply has been put under strain as a result of COVID-19. And we've increasingly seen companies transition towards ensuring that their supply chains are increasingly automated, that they have visibility all the way down the supply chain. In fact, over 300 Canadian CFOs, that's chief financial officers, when asked what they're going to be doing over the next several months to improve their supply chains, said that they are going to adopt digital technologies and massively increase their investment in this sector. Over 70% plan to spend significant amounts of money in this area over the next year. In fact, Kinaxis, one of Canada's leading digital supply chain companies, has seen its share price increase by 60% since January. And then, of course, cybersecurity. There has been nearly a 5-fold increase in the number of malicious attacks globally on critical infrastructure, companies, individuals, and institutions. Governments, businesses are struggling to keep up. They simply do not have sufficient capabilities to put in place the required digital hygiene, digital safety, and digital security components to shore up their infrastructure. With more than half of the world's population going online, working remotely, the number of remote desktops exposed as a result of COVID has shot up by 41%. As such, we've seen a dramatic increase in the demand for cybersecurity services here in Canada. BlackBerry, its stock shot up 20% since April after declining for more than a decade. This is a dramatic transformation where Canada, as CUTIS has demonstrated, has a severe shortage of expertise. Some of the industries most dramatically hit are also those industries that are going to see a long-term shift to digital. In fact, the education sector has been hit the most by cybersecurity and malicious attacks. Over 60% of all recorded malicious attacks have been targeted towards the education sector. Retail has also been hit hard, and as you know, health and financial services are close third and fourth. We can predict that as this digital transformation strengthens, as people move towards more remote working and education opportunities, this trend is going to continue. The numbers of cyber attacks that we've seen since January are staggering. More than 445 million cyber attacks have been recorded. And they range from fraud to espionage to malware and other types of attacks. And they're across every single sector. Ukraine is known, and this is where your value added comes. You're a country that is in conflict and has an extensive cyber dimension. You have been the subject of a number of critical attacks since 2014 against your critical infrastructure, beginning with your electoral system, to include your regional power grid, your national railways, state finance, government, banks, airports, subways, and of course, telecom and transport and energy. You have more expertise, having been on the front lines of some of the most sophisticated multi-vector cyber attacks in the world. And this is recognized globally. Black Energy, which attacked your energy grid, was reported globally. How you manage that, to deal with it, was also reported. NotPetya and Bad Rabbit, some of the worst malware, and ransomware ever invented also was experienced dramatically in Ukraine. You were hit hard, and that spread globally. These all had to do with the fact that companies were simply not prepared, did not patch their networks. It crippled and destroyed data on over 400,000 customer systems, wiping out 1 million computers, representing 90% of your domestic firms, and spread from there. You have proven capability, being on the front line of cybersecurity. You are ranked 4th globally in terms of IT expertise. This is an experience that is in high demand, where if you focus it, if you're able to communicate it effectively, translate your Ukrainian experience in dealing with some of these most sophisticated attacks into a Canadian context, which is just starting to realize its vulnerability, that could be a winning strategy. And this goes beyond just your cyber expertise. Canada and Ukraine have an enduring relationship. Canada is committed to supporting your democracy. This commitment transcends political parties. It's been around for decades, and you can expect it to continue in the near future, at least. This includes military support that Canada has given under Operation Unifor, but it extends far beyond that, as has been discussed by Olga and others. In 2017, we signed a free trade agreement that specifically recognized Ukraine's critical capacity, advanced capacity in ICT as one of the fastest growing sectors, not just in Ukraine, but in the world. You are a recognized IT outsourcing hub. This trade agreement provides a vehicle for enabling fast-tracked, preferential engagement between Ukrainian and Canadian IT companies. It's not easy. The landscape of, as I've discussed, created by COVID-19 has been highly disruptive. And although IT overall has seen an increase in demand, particularly cybersecurity and the other areas I mapped out, not everybody is a winner. It's more competitive than ever before. This is a new reality that COVID-19 has created. Your expertise could be part of the solution. And I think CUTIS provides an avenue to be able to explore that. That's it for my presentation right now, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for really just very timely presentation about consequences of COVID-19. And I think that to personally and to other speakers. Тепер ми перейдемо, I'm sorry, I'm speaking Ukrainian. Again, тепер ми перейдемо до
And now we're going to switch to the final topic that we have. And now we're going to switch to the final topic that we currently have. And the final topic on what's about the money. That's a very interesting topic. We have Mr. Igor Volzhanin with us. He is the CEO of the Data Scene company, and he will tell us a little bit more on the global outlook about the fundraising, about the business culture, about the customers and consumers, about your potential clients abroad, and he will tell us a lot of interesting things. After that, please do not not forget to write down your questions, and we will try to cover those questions. I see that we don't have a lot yet, but we will take a look at. Ihor, are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. Can you hear me properly? Yes. Can you please? I would like to pass the floor to you. We can see you, we can hear you. The floor is yours. I have a very brief presentation. So hi everyone. I would like to start with a presentation, and I will give you a little bit an outline of my company also, but I believe that the simplest thing and the best thing would be to cover the questions that you will have. So if you'll have any questions about the company, about the startups, about how to raise money, about the fundraising, so please write down your questions in chat, and I will try to cover all of that if you will have. So I just would like to see a little bit more interactive collaborations with us. Okay, but let you just please make a slight intro about yourself, and later on after your presentation, we have a plan of having the Q&A session. That's right after your presentation. Okay, great. Super. So I will start with telling a little bit about myself. So I was born in Lviv, but I grew up in Canada. And around 2010, around 2011, I have been working quite a lot in Germany, in Albania, in the US. Then 6 years ago, I've moved to London. I moved to London and has created a company that is called the Data Sign. Slightly speaking about the company, we have been working since 2015. Our main headquarters is located in London. We have now 27 up to 30, let us say up to 30 employees. We have now raised $7 million. This is why our final round was £4 million in 2019. And it happened that we have quite a lot of investors from all over the world. We have the French investors working with us, we have the English investors, and we also have American investors working with us. So I have quite a lot of experience on talking to investors from all over the world. Thus, if you have any questions, then I can actually tell you how it works in different countries if you'll be interested in that, and how we usually find the funding for your startup. Slightly a bit about the company that what we're doing. We're helping the marketologists and marketers to optimize their advertisement, the internet advertising, how it really works. For example, we are using AI and machine learning technologies in order to learn in the fastest way of what do you have in your, for example, in your picture. And later on, we have the deep insights of how the customer and the consumer reacts to different pictures, to different advertisements. It's being done automatically. That's an automated analysis. And we are using many different channels like Facebook, emails, and other channels of the internet advertising just to see and understand what is needed for the person. And then we will provide those additional insights for the marketers and market analysts, so they can choose the specific pictures for specific people, the different texts, so on and so forth. We have been working with a lot of clients from all over the world. We have clients in Singapore, for example. We have clients all over Europe. We have clients in the United States and in the United Kingdom. By the way, we have one of the case studies with one of the companies with emerging medias. We are usually working with the big companies, and Virgin was one of our big clients. We have been working in the first years of our foundation with banks, and we've helped them with their commercials. Right now, we have clients from the telecom sphere. We have clients from e-commerce. We have also clients from charity sphere. So there's a lot of different sectors who come to us, and I basically can say that I can tell you more about how we engage the clients, of how we're doing that. Igor, then I would like to maybe start with a question, because we will follow our schedule more or less. You've said that you have the experience of fundraising and investment raising in different countries. Maybe you can tell us briefly about how you do that, how it works in different countries, what are the technologies, what are the communication styles, and who's actually becomes the investor in those cases, because it's quite clear that not every single person who we meet on the street, even if they have the money, they're becoming an investor. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it seems to me like that. So let us just start with that, and we will continue when moving and with discussing the clients. Okay, speaking on investment, it really matters on the stage of the development of the company, on the development of idea. We're speaking at the first stages. If you have ideas, or if you have people, a smaller team, and then you don't have the product, you don't have the income, then any person can be an investor if you're on the idea stage. Of course, if we are taking a look at the different countries, if we're speaking of different countries, then of course, what investors invest to, that's very different, and with what stage your company should be differs. In the US, they say that it's much easier to raise money for your founding capital, because there's quite a lot of people there who can invest some money. And this is the part of the culture. People are ready to share the money. That is why a lot of people are going to the US to get their founding capital for the development of the idea. But it doesn't work all the time. Again, I have to say that, because even there's a very huge market in the US, and there's quite a lot of people in the US. Americans do not like to invest money into European countries. That's true. And it's very frequent, and in Canada, by the way, also. And sometimes when there are the investment from these countries, from US and from Canada, then usually the investors, they really want the person to go there, to move into Canada or into US. And sometimes it's not really possible. So at the very first stages, it would be better if you will look for the money locally. If we're speaking about Ukraine, so we have talked to some of the foundations in Ukraine. They didn't finance us, but there are some venture funds in Ukraine, and I believe that in Ukraine the market is still really small. So that is really, really hard. The competition is really high, and it's really hard to get your founding capital here only in Ukraine. So we're speaking about like $100,000 or $200,000, $300,000. That is why I had the people I know who are also from Ukraine, who've tried to raise the money, but usually they've covered all of the Europe. So they got to England, they were trying to talk to investors, they were working in Germany or even in Spain. If to speak about the people or the companies that are investing, at the very beginning, at the first stages, those can be the so-called the high network individuals. So those are the people who are earning a lot of money, so who actually have the high net worth. Those are the people in England, for example, who are earning more than £100,000 a year. Or it might be even some kind of like funds or small funds, small investment funds. There is the list of these foundations and funds. You can find that. You can Google it. You can find it on the internet. Those are the so-called the seed capital funds that are basically looking for the companies that are ready to invest at the early stages of the project. And usually, as a rule, to get to those foundations, it's much better just not, writing them an email or just getting to the website or to add up this person in LinkedIn. It would be much better than if you will have the so-called warm introduction, so that, some person that knows you and knows that foundation, they might get you acquainted with that. How can you find these people? Sometimes there are the companies that are helping the startups to find the money and to raise the money. And so they're working, they have their certain interest, the certain percent of interest, and they're giving you the access to their connections, or you should go, for example, for an accelerator. There is an accelerator programs. There are programs that, for example, Techstars, the one that is quite famous and the best in Europe, possibly. So those are the companies that, for example, for 3 months you come into the UK and they are getting you meetings with the investors and then later on helping you to raise the money for your project. If we're already speaking about the company that also has some earnings, has the income, and it really depends on the products that you present or the company that you are, because then you'll be working with much bigger funds, with much bigger foundations, and you can have this direct communications with them, like writing to them an email, but it doesn't really work all the time. Or you should go there specifically and have the personal meeting and looking for the opportunities and ideas how you can collaborate with those foundations. There are the list of those foundations also. And the process usually needs around half a year. So fundraising is a quite long process. And well, it takes at least 6 months, at least 6 months, because you will need to engage the lawyers at some place, and you will also need some additional people there who will help you. That would basically, if we speak about the scale of it. Okay, Igor, a very short question, and then further on I will make a short announcement while we still have all of the participants with us. The short question to you, is that true that the US has East Coast and West Coast investors? Those are the people who are investing with their heart, and people are investing with their mind, with their brain, based on their reasoning. After you will answer this question, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about the communication style, the topic that Olga has mentioned. But before you will start answering this question, I would like to make a brief announcement to all of our participants, to all of the guests of our webinar. Please don't forget to fulfill our survey. This is going to be a small survey for just a couple of minutes. It will just take a couple of minutes, but it is very important for us to know your feedback. And we would like to receive this feedback form for every person who's participating in our events. So I'm really grateful to you in advance. Please help us to collect this information. That's very important for us. Igor, the floor is back to you. So, East Coast, West Coast investors and communication styles. Yes, they invest with money and heart. Okay, let us start with say that there definitely is East Coast and West Coast investors. They're slightly different. If we're speaking about the East Coast, Boston, New York, that are the biggest centers there, and West Coast, that's San Francisco. And so there's much more investors all over the US. There's a lot of investment and there's in startups in Colorado, in Seattle. If we're speaking about Canada, then there's in Toronto, in Vancouver. There's a lot of startup hubs there, by the way. But if we're speaking about East Coast and West Coast investors, yes, there is this slight division, but they're definitely operating differently. Like, for example, if in East Coast, if we speak about New York, for example, then usually those are the investors who are mostly coming from financial sphere, because there's a lot of banking establishments in New York. It's a financial center, basically. There are the people who are investing there that are mostly coming from the banking sector and financial sector. So they always considering you as a business opportunity, and they're mostly operating with figures. So yes, there is this kind of change of style. And in the UK, I think that the culture is mostly resembling to the East Coast style. Like in UK, if you're raising funds, then in UK, they're going to be mostly assessing the startup, assessing of what's the forecasted profitability, of how big the idea is, and then they evaluating the business later on, which is like important. The West Coast, that's San Francisco, the Silicon Valley, that's slightly different situation. Like, yes, it differs because the people who are investing there, they're not coming from the thinking on financial environment. Those are the people, there's a lot of people who first of all have been working for that in a very long time. There are foundations, there are people who have been working for 30, 40 years already in the IT, so they have seen the cycle of investment for quite a long time already. Investment, a lot of problems, and some kind of exit. So like there's some companies that managed to do something and they've earned some money with that. And they have a lot of experience in working with startups. Thus, they understand that the most important thing at the early stages of startups is the idea, the team. It's much more important than of how much money the company has earned in a year before, because those are definitely going to be the numbers that will have to be multiplied by 10 or 100, 1,000 times in some time. So they're mostly considering the people who are standing behind the idea. That's most important for them. Then that is why they really want the companies to move there. Because for them, it's important to help you and to support you. So they will be much more active in participating in development of the company. There's not going to be only making the money transaction that will be the so-called smart money, when the investor also can, for example, give you the meetings with clients, give you additional mentoring or coaching that will help you further on or give you additional experience to that. So this is a difference in this mental approach, in this mentality of fundraising and giving you money. And of course, there are always the exceptions from the rules in both coasts when they're investing to many different companies with different strategies and with different goals. The second question was there. Can you please repeat that? What was the second question? Yes. So we are moving slightly for this 5 P's: people, product, and so we wanted to also discuss a little bit about the customers and consumers you're working with, and we can combine these two topics. So first of all, how to meet the sprints, especially how to meet this needed customer and client virtually, because it's very relevant right now. We're all closed up in our own apartments and we cannot make a physical acquaintance now with a third person to go somewhere. How can you meet your customer now, your clients now? How can you retain your customer and how to behave with these customers? I think that you have had a very international team. I do think that it really helps to communicate with different people. So please, Igor, what do you think? Yes, everything really changed in the recent months, and even the fundraising. People go to US right now, it's impossible. But if you were going to go to America, no one would like to meet you now. Yes, it definitely changes the culture. I believe that there are some changes in that, and sometimes when it works even better than it used to be. For example, we were really having the long conversations with big banks in Spain. And Spain is a country that a very slow country. It all moves really slowly there. When we were speaking about a very big bank, then the contracting with them can take a year or a couple of months. So the sales cycle will take you years. Right now, everything changes. And if, for example, before it was clear for us that even if it's the first time that you have communicated through Skype or Zoom, then the second meeting is going to be one-on-one in person. So it's either you or them, but basically you coming to meet them and get acquainted with one another. And that was okay, and it might take a month after the first virtual meeting has been made. Right now, nothing like that is happening. It's quite clear that there's not going to be an in-person meeting after that, so you keep on moving further on even without it. So the sales cycle is shortening right now. So the second meeting can be like after a week after the initial meetings, and it will be like 2 or 3 times faster than it used to be before. So yes, it all changes, the landscape changes, the culture changes, and in this way it changes for better. The question was also how you can find the person, how you can find the people, how you can find the investors. It's not that easy right now, like it's never has been easy, because even if before you could go, for example, for a conference and meet a lot of people there, it's still that, you know, the C-level executives, they're not going to conferences really frequently, so they're not really getting acquainted with you. So we usually got acquainted with a junior employee and then started moving forward. So it never was easy. Right now, that there is a very interesting thing happening right now when the C-level suite people, it's even easier to meet them right now, because right now what we are using we're using different so-called the different network groups. Those are the organizations that are including many different CMOs, and they are getting us acquainted with those CMOs. So right now we have much more meetings that we used to have before COVID-19, because right now these people, they have a more desire to do something, they have more desire to develop their monotonous day. So that is why there's much more meetings that are currently happening, and I believe that it's one of the best methods. So to find some kind of like industry groups, or try to find this some kind of like this so-called introductory groups where you have a lot of different people who are working with one another, and for whom the startups is something that they offer, some the field of their work. On the other hand, what we also see right now, there's a lot of the email communication that have been revived. The people and the big organizations that are using emails much more to communicate with their clients, to communicate with their customers, to communicate with their colleagues, and there's much more emails coming now, too many emails coming. It doesn't really work a lot because we have a lot of emails on an everyday basis, but from what really works for us is really this, let us say, one-on-one internet meetings and those introductions, to find people who would introduce you, who would get you acquainted with the other people who are needed for you, who you need, who are your potential clients. If we speak about the sales cycles, then what we see now, this is like the first months when the lockdowns and the pandemic just started. It was really hard for all of us because no one in those big companies really understood how you can sign the contract right now, because you can't do that physically. You can't bring it to physically to a person, how you do that. And before, we didn't have those processes in place. It was really hard for us. Right now it's more or less in place already, and right now you can already sign the contract. The contracts are being signed, and we're continuing signing new agreements with new companies and new countries and new clients. And it really works. It really works. And if we speak about the process itself, it can be done through internet. It can be done through internet acquainting and through communications that you can use via email or any other channels. So I say that even much more easier and simpler than it used to be before. Thank you very much. It was interesting and nice, and you're currently working in the sphere that is basically one of the most relevant spheres, because marketing is very important right now, because marketing is about how to get the attention of your customer, how to get the attention of your customer not seeing your customer right now, how to get their attention for them to click on the product that you're selling is. So there's a bit of analyzing what the big brother sees in you, what big brother watching you. I even see this background that I see that you are sitting in front of. I thought that that was basically a kind of house, but no, I've seen that this is a set out background. But I now know that this devil is in details. Can you please tell us about the development of your product, how you're working on the development of your product to make it, let us say, tasty, to make it interesting for your clients, and how you promote your products, how you present your product to the clients? Well, I always had this idea of treating the products as Apple treats it. So trying to be very minimalistic, but trying to give a lot of thought into that. And it's really hard to do that because it's much easier to do somehow, but later on trying to improve it. So for me, that doesn't really work. So if you do not have the main idea behind your product, if you don't have this main idea that the product has to be ideal from the very beginning, then the whole campaign, the whole company, well, the product will not work properly. So we have been working with processes in really long time. So how can we find the best ways to set the processes of development? And I cannot say that we have really perfected that. We have a lot of problems with that. We're improving it. But right now, how the process works, we have our sales team, our sales and marketing team, and they're constantly communicating with our clients or potential clients. And after every meeting, they are filling in a special survey, special form, when they're writing what the client liked, what the client didn't like, and what the client expects to see from the product. So what is the most important for the client in the product? Later on, we know that there is the product management team that reads out every report, and there is this word that shows all of the priorities. So we call it the user story, or like our jobs to be done. Every piece of job, every task that has to be done by our user, ever they have voiced out that they need that, or they do that, or they need to have this function that has been written down. Like for me as a user, for example, it is important for me to see that every day I'm coming to Facebook and I'm setting out this advertisement and I'm starting the advertisement. So I need some kind of product, or I need some kind of software that will help me to launch my advertisement campaign faster. So like job to be done to launch the advertisement campaign faster. Or like I have many pictures, I do not know which one to choose. Okay, then job to be done is choosing the perfect picture. So every job to be done is written down, and they are multiplying. So, and we are then deciding on the priority of the task or priority on the job, depending on what is the product that the sales shows and what is the reaction of our client for this product. Later on, the product management are already discussing the possible change with the head of development, and they're writing they're detailing the specific jobs to be done. We have the specific detailization, we have the user interface and user experience specialist. So the user experience designer and user experience specialist, they're first of all talking to the huge circle, the big amount of users, not clients, but the specific users, the ones that are going to be now pushing the buttons and that are going to be using the tool that we're developing. Because like sometimes the people who are signing the contracts and the people who are going to be the final users, those are different people. And it's very important that you sell to one person, the other person is going to be using it. So after they have already our user experience, people has talked to the users. If there is something new that has to be developed, and they're constantly showing us what they have developed, they're showing us the wireframes, we're testing out. Then it goes to our designer who's already designs, who also sets out how it's going to be in our product. Then we are writing the additional job description of what has to be done, what function is it, what should it do, how fast it should do that. And then it's being passed to our developers team that are actually developing it and coding it into the product. It might be done very fast, it might be done not that fast as we would like it to happen. It really depends on the complexity of the issue, which really depends on what function, whether the function is new. It might take a week, it might take a month, it depends. Thank you very much. And I see the question straight away, and even before the session of Q&A has started, but there is a question: are you an outsourcing company, or you're the product-based company that adopts your product for every client that you're working with? We have never been an outsourcing company. For some time, we have been, we always worked as a service company mostly, but even when we have been working as a service provision company, then we have always tried to tailor our services specifically for the client. So we didn't have this one specific product that we would scale up. We basically had some additional services that we provided to that. Like, for example, we helped them to change the advertisement, but not through a very specific product. Right now, we have a specific product. So we're the product company. We are the product company that works, that sells the software as service, and we're selling our products. On the second issue that you said, the second part of the question, whether we're tailoring it for specific clients, like now we're not tailoring it or changing it for specific clients. And in all of these processes, you have to have a clear understanding that if, for example, we're speaking about the sales team, then they are communicating with our clients. They can make like 50 calls a week, and they can talk to 50 potential clients. And what does our product team and product management team do? They're getting all of the information that our sales managers collected from those 50 acquaintances, and they see what are the priorities for those possible clients between the functions that are already there in the product and the functions that are not there yet, maybe, but that would help our sales to sell this product to the possible customers. So this process is not that much about changing the features for every client, but maybe to creating the processes that will help us to develop a product that will sell fast. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We've run out of time, let us say, on the working part of our agenda. We are now turning to the Q&A session, but before we do that, I would like to make a couple of brief concluding words and to wrap up our webinar. So the first thing, as Igor has said, feedback. So I would like to once again remind you about our survey that we're going to have in the end of this webinar. Please, I would like to ask all the people who are participating in our webinar and who are listening to our webinar today, please do not forget to fulfill the survey. And right now, I would like to ask each of our panelists, each of the speakers of our panel today, for a minute, just to have this summing up sentence, to sum up all of the work of our webinar one by one. I think that's Konstantin Vlasyuk, he's already left us, but Maxim, we would like to start with you. Just a summing up 1 minute sentence from your side. Thank you very much, Emma. I don't have any kind of wrapping up, concluding phrase for me to say. I think that we should use this time just to answer some of the questions that have been voiced out in our chats. Like, for example, I have seen a question on whether the data on salaries have included the taxes or no. So taxes included, those are the salaries before the taxes. But we have to understand that in Canada there's a slightly different taxation system. There is the so-called progressive taxation system, and depending on the level of your annual earnings, there's going to be the different level of taxes applied to you. I can't recall the precise figures right now, but if you, for example, earn $25,000 a year, then they're not going to be taxed even. This is like the minimum of salary that doesn't go under taxation. If it's going to be around $100,000 a year, then of course it will have a higher level of taxation. I cannot give you the clear numbers. Maybe some of my colleagues, maybe Olga or Sasha or Emma, will have additional information to that. But as far as I remember, that it's the highest rate is more than 30% of overall income. So basically, those are the numbers. The numbers that we voiced out is before the tax. Maybe we'll ask John about taxation, about taxes, just for us to be clear about the numbers. First of all, we mentioned that the US dollars, and those were the salaries before taxation. Yes, but before that, I would like to have this final sentence also in final comments about currency. In my presentation, there is a number of data in Canadian dollars, when we, for example, but on the slide, when we are combining the different segments and different spheres of IT industries, that was in Canadian dollars. And it just mentioned, just dollar. But when it says USD, that's the US dollar, then this is, there was the slide about the data when we're comparing the hourly rate for the work of the IT specialists. So that we meant the US dollars. And there was also the US dollars used in the salaries on different positions in the IT segment. So there was the US dollars, yes. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Maxim. Alexandra, I can see one question from your side. Maybe you will cover this question and we will see the final sentence from your part. Whether we have the legislation in Canada or the practices of the agreements between the works and services provided, like a legal notion of service provided and tasks or work to be completed. Yes, thank you, Emma. First of all, I would like to thank all of our participants for their attention, for their being here with us. There's a huge amount of participants listening to us right now. But I would like to say that if you have any questions, you have my contacts at the end of the presentation. I would like to comment on two issues that have been voiced out in chat. First of all, whether there is difference between providing works and given services. We have this international trade, rights, and depending on the GATS agreement, there is no legal differences between this services provision and the works complete. Speaking on the Canadian national legislation, I cannot say that there is a difference between that. I'm not sure whether those terms are being used in Canadian legislation. So I would like to get to this question: what laws should we use when we are making the agreements? Well, first of all, in order to provide services to Canadian customers, there's no compulsory need to register a company in Canada. So you can provide services for the Canadian companies without leaving the territory of Ukraine. So this is the type 1 of service provision. But you should also consider under what law you are signing your agreement, because sometimes we had these situations when, for example, they mentioned some institutions that never exist, or they said like the law of Canada, they don't have this notion in Canadian legislation. Each province of Canada, except for Quebec, they have the Anglo-Saxon law, so the precedent law. So you also have to remember that you can use that. Quebec has the continental law system. That means that it's quite similar to the system that we have in Ukraine. So it means that we're basing on the Legislative Norm and Regulations Act. And would like to also think that we're we have worked with one of the companies. They didn't have a very big contract. They've had services around under $10,000, but they say that it is going to be using the right of England, or then all of the disputes will be settled in the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. Can you just imagine how much money will you pay for the arbitral court if there's going to be some kind of disputes to cover? So yes, the counterpart, they have thoughts about it. So like, it's kind of nice provisions there that you're using the rights and working with tribunals, but you have to be very realistic about the settlement that you will do. So we have to be very realistic about the possible law enforcement of those requirements. So do not choose the law of Canada, because there's no notion like that in the legal language of Canada, but this is just the overall questions that you have stated up. Okay, thank you very much. So in order to earn the money for the High Court of London, you have to work a little bit. Thank you, Alexandra. Have a nice evening. I would like to turn to Ola. Olga, please, I would like to ask you to have your final comments. Ola, can you hear us? Yes. So final comments, final remarks, maybe some of the questions that you've seen also were very, very interesting for you, and you'd like to cover that? The only thing I would like to do is to thank the audience for their attention, because those are the most resilient people who have stayed with us. I can see that there is a high demand for information in this sphere, and it's really, really good for us. We're really happy about that. I would like to once again repeat the notion that this is the best moment for continuing the collaboration. Even we don't have, we're now wrapping up as the project. So, but the most important thing for you is to find the organization that has the reputation, has the experience of working with Canada, and that's a unique opportunity right now that for free you can post out the profile of your company at the export portal. So I just would like to remind you about that. So this is the opportunity that is creating this window of opportunity for us while the project is given their mandate to the other service providers. My contacts are also mentioned in the presentation. If you're interested in doing something, please also address us. We're really eager to collaborate with us, and I wish you all the best. I wish you all the best, and I wish you all the persistence in coming to Canadian markets. Thank you, Olga, for your impact. John?
Yes, thank you, everyone. Again, for your patience. Just I guess, the key messages from me are that COVID has changed almost everything. All the statistics, the data that you read before are not as meaningful as they were perhaps 3 months ago. But fortunately for the IT sector, there is a lot of opportunity. This crisis has been a harbinger of a lot of innovation. And I think if Ukrainian companies are capable of being able to translate and communicate effectively how their expertise in the areas I highlighted, for instance, e-gaming, remote learning, cybersecurity, are on par with the best of the best, that you have services and know-how that you can offer to Canada that will help it address some of these key challenges and opportunities brought with digital transformation, then you can succeed. But it requires a carefully thought out strategy where you communicate your value added in very specific terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. Your external point of view is very important for us because, they say that you cannot wash a car while you're sitting inside of it. So it's very important for us also to hear, how do you see us from outside of our country? Because how we see ourselves is one thing, and how you see us is a very important thing for us. Thank you very much for giving us this second point of view. Thank you very very much for your collaboration. We're really grateful for all your impact you have for our project, and thank you very much for staying with us for the couple of months that the project is still active. Thank you, John. Igor, we would like to get back to you. Maybe there are some questions that you would like to cover also. You know, I haven't seen a lot of questions yet. Maybe I have just, you know, tuned in a couple of times later, but just one short notification, if I may. Yes, okay, but I would like to say that I agree with John. There's a lot of things that has changed right now, but in IT sector, and not only in the cybersecurity, the marketing and stuff, I do believe that there's a lot of opportunity coming right now. There's a lot of opportunities coming right now. There's a lot of things that never existed before. And I believe that right now the businesses can be done even more effectively and in a faster pace. I believe that, I really hope that everyone who has been listening to all of our webinar, they were really interesting for them and they really enjoyed it. And maybe just wanted to wrap up it on a very positive and optimistic note. I believe that right now that is the high time for using the time that for the time that the world used to be, you know, the world gone quiet a little bit right now, so you can use this time to build up the new products, to build up the new opportunities, and, you know, to come with the new opportunities to the market. And I believe that the market will be waiting for the new opportunities and products to rise. Thank you. Thank you. We still have some time for your questions, and we have this rules of 18 seconds. So if there's still some time while you can ask your questions, while you're still thinking about the question you would like to ask, I would like to thank to all of our panelists, to all of our speakers, to all of our audience, to all of our professionals, to Kostya, to Olena, to the people who have helped us to prepare this webinar and who helped us to get over some of the technical challenges that we have. But also, I do believe that we also should be grateful to the Canadian government for the overall thorough support of Ukraine as a developing country, as a country that is now searching for its place in the world. And we have to thank the government of Canada for the CUTIS project that has provided us this opportunity to research, get a deeper look into the Canadian market that helps us to continue and working to help us to looking for the Canadian partners. So once again, I'm really sincerely grateful for your presence. I would like to remind you about the feedback. A couple of seconds now to get you the questions if we have. If no, then we will go into wrap up our webinar and to enjoy the evening, enjoy the whole day, to take a look at all of your Facebook feed, to enjoy all the embroidered shorts that you have today. So thank you very much and have a nice day.